Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Kelly Martin Schuh, Amazon best-selling author, speaker, and transformational coach for women. And today we have a very special guest who I would love to introduce to you. She is a mind-body somatic awareness teacher and instructor and goddess, and she does peak performance. And I am so happy to invite you to our show, Anahita.
Hello. Thank you so much, Kelly. And thanks for having me. And hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. So we are here. It's almost like late afternoon, like coffee talk. Like we are here to be in service and to have a conversation about resiliency, resiliency in the modern woman and what that means. But before we go into kind of the meat of it, Anahita, if you want to share a little bit about, your journey and kind of like what brings you to the passions and the care that you give to so many people.
Well, my journey on this path started about 5-6 years ago when I started developing some pain in my body that doctors couldn't diagnose for the longest time. And that experience sent me down this journey of trying to figure out what was really going on, because I had a really healthy lifestyle. I was happy. My nutrition was well. So it was a big shock that all of a sudden so many joints in my body were deeply in pain, and doctors could not find any trouble, no inflammation in the body, nothing, no structural problems, nothing that should have caused so much pain. I was prescribed quite powerful medications, antidepressants, opioid painkillers. I personally felt like they weren't the right option for me because I couldn't quite understand what the root is. And, I think this is where my childhood curiosity really showed up for me and really benefited me, because I've always wanted to get to the bottom of what's going on, but what's going on? So
what's really going on, right? In the face of, we hear this so often, in the face of doctors and healthcare providers saying there's nothing wrong with you. I mean, this is such a story, I think, that speaks to so many people.
Yeah. So as I became more and more curious, wanting to get to the bottom of it, in your mid 30s, somebody's telling you that, no, this is going to be the rest of your life and you're going to have to take some strong medications and we don't know why. And if we don't know why, that sounds like an invitation. Not the end of the road. So I took that invitation and I went deeper, and it took me a long time. It took me about 3 years. And the answers didn't come from where I thought they would come.
So where did you think they were going to come from?
I'm sorry, what?
Where did you think the answers were going to come from? Did you think that they would come through like lab tests or like, what were you thinking?
I definitely thought that the answers would come through the lab tests and the doctors and seeing the best practitioners I could. I even saw some incredible, healers of alternative modalities and acupuncture, and really worked on it that way, trying to get the answers and always looking outside for the answers, because that's kind of how we're trained. We're trained to look for certain kind of answers outside of ourselves, especially when it comes to medical and conditions and physical things happening in our body. And yes, there is a time, when there is infection and there's acute illnesses and we break a bone and there's something going on. Yes, we got to go out there and ask for the answers and receive the proper treatment. But however, when we go and ask and we don't get the answers, to me, that's not an invitation to just call it a day. To me, that's an invitation to really look for it deeper. What is going on here? And it really took me a while before I started recognizing that the answers lie within. I think there is a sense of empowerment that comes from understanding that we hold quite a bit of agency over our life, our reality that's happening around us.
Absolutely.
And I can tell you, though, it's hard.
It's really hard. And I know, I think our audience would really appreciate, you have shared with me, like, how challenging, like, can you just share a little bit, like, how challenging a typical day was for you before you went on this journey and this quest?
So, my days would start with pain. I would wake up in pain and a level 2 to 3 pain, which was, the best part of my day was the morning. still very stiff getting out of bed. I would sleep well. And as the day would progress, I kept my job. I maintained my work. I really loved my job. I was working in technology sector. I was successful at what I did. I loved my colleagues. And I was working on exciting projects, but I was working a lot.
Yeah.
And I was also putting a lot of pressure on myself to perform and to get to that next level, get the next level of funding and startup life, you know? And the days as it would progress, the pain would get worse and worse and worse. I couldn't go up a flight of stairs. I had to always take elevators. I couldn't drive for more than 20 minutes seated. I would have excruciating back pain. There were days I couldn't type. I had to like dictate my voice. There were days I couldn't hold a cup of coffee in my hands. And I had a table, my desk was a stand-up and sit-down desk, so it would elevate and go back down. I had a ball, I had an ergonomic chair, and I had a couch.
Yeah.
So there were 4 or 5 different settings that I had to shuffle through every 20 to 30 minutes to be able to move through the day. And then when I would get home, by then the level of pain was like 8. So once the level of pain was that high, I could barely feed myself and then just be flat on my belly for the rest of the night. I would medicate with cannabis tinctures. That's what supported me at the time. And the pain would get a little better, but it wouldn't fully go away. And that was my life for about 3 years. I couldn't dance. I couldn't do a whole lot. It was challenging.
Yeah. And I can remember when our paths crossed, you were sharing with me, I mean, I want the listeners to really get the quest that you went on. I mean, you went to the Amazon. Like, I'm like, this is my kind of girl. Like the woman that goes to the Amazon to talk to the shamans, like, we got to talk. Like, we got some things in common. And so if you'd be willing to kind of share, like, that's amazing, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I got to tell you, I don't come from that background. You know, I'm a city girl that grew up in a big city and not really any nature around. California is like wilderness here for me, you know, and making that decision to take travels and become a little bit more adventurous was a scary decision for me. But when I made that decision, and I just knew that I'm going to go stay. The first time I went to the Amazon, I've been there 4 years now. And the first time I went out to the Amazon, the big question was, am I going to maintain my sanity with all the bugs in the environment?
Yeah. There are big bugs, right?
Oh, they're big bugs. They're scary bugs. They're friendly bugs. They're snakes. They're tarantulas. Yeah, definitely. So part of the question was, I just knew I'm either going to lose my mind while I'm down there, or I'm going to find harmony and peace somewhere. And that harmony and peace came. It was challenging at first, but it came. And I opened up, you know, to really embracing nature and having dialogue with nature. You know, I won't harm you if you do not harm me, and kind of having contracts. You know, it sounds funny to have contracts with snakes or insects, you know, but I started kind of opening this dialogue of communication with my surrounding, becoming a little more aware. And then as that happens, you just feel like you are part of nature.
We are, right? And I think
we are part of nature, and we grow with nature. So it just, the level of peace that staying quiet in a intense environment, but nevertheless magical and beautiful environment they provide. So I think a lot of my the first points on my resiliency in regards to my external environment really started happening when I started putting myself in these really uncomfortable situations that I wouldn't put myself in otherwise.
Right. And so, so this idea of resiliency. So first, before we go into that, I'm curious, because everyone that has an amazing story like you do, there's a moment where like things shift, and I'm sure you've had more than one moment in this journey, but when was it really clear that you're like, I've got to majorly change my life in order to heal? Like, do you remember kind of a moment where that light bulb turned on and you're like, I can't live this way anymore?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely gold in that question and that process that happens right before things start to change. And, you know, they say that it's darkest right before the dawn, and it's so true. I felt like I was at the end of the rope. after 3 years of fighting and being, I'm the warrior, I'm going to get to the bottom of this, I'm going to get it, I'm rejecting medication, I'm rejecting this, I'm rejecting injections, all these things, because nobody knew what was going on. So for me, I was at a point, at the 3-year point, that I had exhausted all my energy, all my financial resources, and all the avenues that I potentially could go that I had awareness around.
Yeah.
That's when, this is challenging to share, but I started contemplating suicide. I won't call that I was suicidal, but I started really thinking about it. And what's the value of, like, what's the life worth living if it's pain day in, day out, and it just kept getting worse. It wasn't the same amount of pain. The pain just kept getting worse and worse as every week and every year passed by. It just became more and more challenging. Yeah. And so the question, it was just a question I kept posing to myself. What does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to live? If this is what living looks like, what's the purpose of the suffering? I can't quite get it. And it's easy when you're in pain to drop into a place of victimhood. Yeah. It's really easy to do that. I remember that my teacher at one point, after a long meditation, I was crying because I was in so much pain. Yeah. And he turned to me and he said, what's going on? And I said, this pain is killing me. And he said, honey, it's not killing you, it's teaching you. Oh, I got angry. Wow. I got really angry inside. And I was like, oh, what does he know? How can he tell me that? What does he know what it's like to be in pain like this? Pain is such a difficult experience because it's not visible. People don't see. You break your leg, everyone will show up to support you and help you. Totally. When you're in pain day in, day out for years, nobody knows. It's invisible, and nobody can measure your level of pain. So pain is a challenging space to be in. But I think that's when I started. There was a point that I decided, I don't have many options. I either have to take these medications and, pray that they might work and pray that the side effects won't impact me in a really big way. Or I can't continue on. And it just felt like the end of the road. And for me, that's when I dropped into a place of acceptance.
So you went from, what was the time frame where, what a beautiful lesson. I just want to repeat that for people that didn't hear it. So, you said this pain is killing me, right? And your teacher's response is, no, it's teaching you. Mm-hmm. So that's a victim, right? Came out, angry and so mad. You don't get it. You don't understand, right? And this speaks to so many people. Maybe they're not in physical pain, but maybe they have, any number of things, financial pain, maybe someone died, like that pain, as you said, it could be physical or emotional, it's all of it. How did you go, what was the time frame from that, like, anger to acceptance?
Mm-hmm. It took about 6 months. I'm not a very good student.
Actually, 6 months, I would say, you figured you suffered for how many years?
3 years.
3 years. So 3 years, 6 months. Wow. I would say you took the fast track, actually.
Yeah. So to me, just in that period of time, I had to drop to a place of acceptance. And God bless my family. I'm so grateful I had my family, because if I didn't have my family, I probably would have taken the easy route of just saying, you know what, life isn't worth living.
Oh, but I just can't hear you say that. Oh. And yet so many people do go to that place and they're embarrassed and shameful to talk about it. So I'm so proud of you speaking out about it. You know?
Hear this. People have these experiences, especially if they're not physically well. It's easy to drop into a place of victimhood and sadness and just want to check out. It's easy to do that. It's much harder to learn how to gather our energy, how to bring strength back, how to bring inspiration back into our energetic field. That's really the hard work to do. And to me, I had the inspiration because of my family. I love my parents so much. I love my sister so much. I love my family so much. And it just felt like I can't abandon these people and cause all this heartache for the rest of their lives. So I have to accept where I am. And to me, because I've always been a warrior spirit, acceptance always felt like defeat.
What a great awareness. Yeah. Felt like giving up. Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, no, I'm gonna drop into a place of acceptance and just accept that this is my life and stop resisting. And that's really where our suffering lies, is in our resistances. I mean, Buddhism tells us that in one of the core teachings of Buddhism is that your suffering lies in your resistances. So if I was resisting, what will happen if I didn't resist and just accepted this? It was difficult. There was still definitely a challenge happening there. And as I accepted it, then I had to look at options. Okay, I'm going to have pain for the rest of my life. What are my options? Options were not very great. The options that were presented to me were a lot of pain management, opioids, antidepressants, really strong medications. And as I started reluctantly look through to find the right psychiatrist, the right pain management place to see, I was still feeling the part of me that really didn't want to do that. However, as I started doing my research and looking into psychiatry, and this is few times, I would say 3-4 times in my life, I've just felt like there has been this divine intervention, just, spirit guides showing up and saying, you know what, we're going to show you a different way, but what you needed to learn all this time was the acceptance.
Right.
As I dropped into acceptance and started doing that research, I got exposed to the work of a doctor named Dr. John Sarno, who wrote this incredibly powerful book on mind-body medicine.
And just because I'm going to put it in the typing box so we can see this, it's Dr. Sarno?
John Sarno.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's called Healing Back Pain, the Mind-Body Connection.
All right, tell us more.
It's for any pain that could be related to mind-body connection. And not all pain is mind-body related. I want to be very clear about that. Not all pain is mind-body related, but there is a big chunk of pain that is mind-body related. And also mind-body healing modalities might not completely resolve pain, but they will definitely help lower the pain. It happens all the time. It's one of the core principles in holistic pain management. But as I became more exposed to mind-body medicine, I learned a lot. I learned that my past trauma in childhood would have impacted that experience. I learned that, my own mental way of processing things, my thought processes and my approach to life had a whole lot to do with it. And that's stress. Stress was the core contributor to the level of pain I was experiencing in my body. And that sent me down the path of getting exposed to somatic therapy work, as a way of releasing tension and trauma memory from the muscular structure of the body. Right. And also got trained. I got exposed to the work on mind body and changing thought patterns around pain, how we perceive pain. And now you could fill in the blanks, whether it's pain or anything else, how we perceive whatever condition that is in front of us will dictate how intensely we experience those symptoms.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit, about the perception and cultivating resiliency. Like if you can give some what I call little golden nuggets for people who are listening and they're experiencing right now physical pain or emotional pain, and they're logging in and they're seeing us live and they're like, resiliency of the modern woman. I think I need some of that. Can you give us some guidelines and some tips?
Definitely. So I think, when we talk about resiliency, a lot of times people, when we talk about resiliency, they'll think, oh, how do I do more and become less triggered? And how do I handle more?
Right.
And I think that's the wrong question to ask.
Okay.
In our culture and our society often will encourage people to find their edge and push through to accomplish more and do more and perform more, have more results. And that is completely disregarding the nervous system, the state of the nervous system, and pushing our nervous system continuously beyond its limit. It's going to have ramifications. It's going to have an impact on both the mind and the body. So when it comes to resiliency, the work is around, it's a two-tier work. One, how do I discharge stress from my body? What modalities are supporting me to let go of tension and stress from my body right now? So first thing is, how do we treat and bring balance to this moment right now? And then the second step is, how do we start building a larger container?
Let's just take a moment and repeat that. So step one, so everyone can hear. Step one is releasing the stress in the moment, is what I heard you say. And then step 2 is, how do I increase the container of resiliency? Did I hear that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So if we have, our nervous system has finite capacity of how much stress it can handle. So we usually start with a baseline of stress that we're not even aware of: childhood experiences, environmental stress, noise, whatever it is, some relationship troubles, some financial troubles. These things start getting added up slowly into our little container of how much stress we can hold. And at some point, if we don't really have a strategy for discharging that stress from our nervous system, at some point it will overflow. And it will overflow, whether in form of anger or depression or physical illness. It doesn't actually matter. At some point, it will overflow and it will manifest in some form in our lives. So a few strategies that really support that on a more basic level, on a more subtle level, absent of a big traumatic episode, say in childhood or any kind of major sexual trauma. We're talking about just daily stressors for bulk of the population. Meditation, yoga, healthy nutrition, removing sugars from our diets, that really helps. Mindfulness practices are some of the most incredible practices out there that support people in calming their nervous system. And once we can calm our nervous system and bring balance to it, then our next work becomes, how do I increase the container of how much I can hold? Because if the only control we have is, we often don't have the control on the environment and what happens in traffic or relationships or difficult colleagues or health challenges. These are all stressors that often we will feel like there isn't much we can do about it. And it's that hopelessness and helplessness that exacerbates the stress. However, we can do quite a bit about it. The one choice we always have is how we react to the environment. Right. And we can change how we react to the environment. One, by increasing the size of the container, and two, by reprogramming our patterns, our thought patterns, and how we perceive our reality. So when it comes to increasing the size of the container, it's a practice. So I utilize techniques like TRE, which is trauma release exercises. There's somatic therapy techniques that are designed to discharge tension and stress from the body through tremoring. So that will discharge the stress, and over continuous periods of practice, it will also help increase the container that we can hold. Because as we continuously approach our edge and then take a step back, instead of pushing through it, take a step back, allow the nervous system to integrate whatever happened, and then go back to that edge, we will notice that every time we can go a little bit further without putting our nervous system into tremendous amount of pressure. So over time, our container starts growing. And whereas something in the past would have triggered us, and the example I give is that I used to feel like life was happening right under my nose. Everything was happening right here, and it was really intense.
Yeah.
And through
not a whole lot of spaciousness. It was like boom, 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 with the concept of like that energy of the pain, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's like right there, that victim place that you talked that we
Yeah. And as we work on expanding the container, and I did these practices for a period of time and I expanded the container, I started feeling like my reality is happening about 5 to 10 feet away.
Wow.
And this time, in this space, I can slow down time. I can slow down my response. I can slow down so much. And that was really the magic of somatic therapy work. When I got exposed to that, I just knew that I had found the gold that was going to support me to just find some balance in my body right now.
Yeah.
And then work on examining the thought processes. There are a few categories of our negative thought patterns that pop up quite a bit. I'll just give you one example, like catastrophizing.
Yes.
When something small happens, we can catastrophize it and make it this big thing down the future that's going to go wrong. But in the moment, it's not wrong. There is nothing wrong. So our stress is related to the future event that might or might not happen. Or we do fortune telling. For example, I woke up with this level of pain. Well, by the end of the day today, I'm definitely going to be in excruciating pain. Or I have all
negative fortune telling. Yeah.
Or I have this pain, I'm going to end up in a wheelchair. That's both telling and catastrophizing.
And catastrophizing. It's funny that you mention catastrophizing, because I see this a lot in the women that I work with. And being mindful of our words, right? Being mindful of our words and the stories that we tell. And I do believe that we live in a culture right now that is addicted to drama. And so it's like whoever has the most drama and the most pain wins, right? And we see that, and it's like, wow, like that's not how I live. But when I look to media, which is also one of the reasons why I do a whole lot of media and watching what's happened, because it's their job to scare us. It's their job to catastrophize us. And I even think about daily interactions with people. It would be like, hi, Anahita, how are you doing today? And many people will say, oh, I'm so stressed, or, oh, I'm just so busy, I have no time. Like, you think of the responses to how are you doing in our culture. How often do we hear, wow, life is really awesome, and I have the spaciousness to think and heal, and you don't hear that, right? And it's like people are addicted to the drama, and they create more of it because everything's energy. So I love that you bring up that idea of catastrophizing, because I think as a culture, we've turned the volume up, and in doing so, we're suffering. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think, negative emotions, negative stories get a lot more viewership and attention because our brains harbor what we call a negativity bias. And the negativity bias of our brain is there as a protective evolutionary mechanism to help us sustain. Yeah. But it can become overactive and get out of control. So whereas, remembering that, I give this example often, remembering that when I was riding my bicycle, this one time, and I didn't look in front of me, and my cousin pulled a prank and I fell on my face, and I took some really major cuts and bruises. Well, I learned that I got to look in front of me. My negativity bias really supported me. So I remember that event because it was critical for my survival.
Right.
Now, when we go through life, things happen all the time. And often our brain will hold on to the negative part of something. Let's say a relationship didn't work out. Well, we can't just take that negative part of that and apply that to the rest of life, because it's not about survival. It's really not about survival. So noticing that, and that just the awareness. And that's what I tell people, that with enough patience and awareness, you can change anything. Absolutely. So once we have the awareness that I have this negativity bias. I kind of have this tendency to think the worst is going to happen. I have a tendency to think I'm sick, or I'm going to die of cancer, or something awful is going to happen to me, or I'm going to be broke and I'm not going to have anything in my old age. Like, there's these different ways that will catastrophize things, and will have this negativity bias that in healthy circumstances, it helps support you and make sure that you don't repeat mistakes. But that's really for critical survival. It's not for living life. We can't live our life from that place ever. So a lot of the work is around, how do I improve my positivity? How do I bring up the energy? How do I notice these old ways and not fight them or judge myself for having them, but get curious about them?
I was hoping you were going to go to curiosity. Because viewers, I actually recently took one of Anahita's courses, and we spoke about curiosity. And I would love for you to speak to the raisin test.
Sure. So the raisin test is it's more of the mindfulness test. So the raisin test is the mindfulness test, but you can get curious about it too. And it's really showing, it's there to demonstrate what we experience, how much we actually observe and experience when we put our awareness into what we're doing. We often, when it comes to eating, especially, we're just eating. We're watching TV or having a conversation or doing a million other things while we're eating. So we're not really experiencing the full spectrum of the food in front of us most of the time. So with the mindful raisin exercise, it's a mindful raisin exercise because it's so small, and you can do it with cranberries or any other tiny little, dried fruit of any sort, to really first put it in your mouth and then not chew it, and just let it sit in the mouth. Notice all the sensations, saliva, flavor, what else, texture, everything that's happening in the mouth. And then slowly take that first bite. And just first tiny bite, and then notice what's happening, the juice of the raisin flowing in the mouth, and just noticing all the sensations. by focusing your awareness for just a minute or two on the experience of slowly taking bites and chewing the raisin and having it in the mouth and then keeping it in the mouth for a while and then swallowing it. It's a 3-minute practice, 3 to 4 minute practice. Yeah. But it starts bringing a lot of awareness of like, whoa, so much is happening even in my personal experience that I'm not fully aware of, that I'm not really attuned to. So a lot of the work is an attunement and attuning to our reality, attuning to our thoughts. What's happening in my body? What's happening in my mind? What's happening in my environment? And when we do that, we require an element of curiosity to get there. So when we bring our element of curiosity into play, we ask one big question: what more can I learn?
Oh, I love that. What more can I learn? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And so for me, the mindfulness is, it is that curiosity of when the mind starts to travel down a negative path, like you talked about fortune telling, you know, when the mind goes into that place, how you can break out of it. Right. And I know that cultivating curiosity, like, what else could happen? You know, there's a little book called The What If Monster. And I don't know if you and I have had this conversation or if you've heard of the book, but it's a childhood book. And the What If Monster's premise is the little girl or little boy, I don't remember what gender it was, is like, well, what if the kids don't like me? Or, you know, what if I don't hit the ball when I go to hit it? Or what if, and they go through that cycle of the negative fortune telling, right? And right in the middle of the book, there's a different question. And the question is, well, what if you meet your best friend on the playground? And what if you hit the home run, right? And so I think that I love teaching children and adults that simple question of getting curious, right? And bringing mindfulness, because we often tend to go down these patterns, especially as these negative patterns. People become addicted to these negative patterns, and it's a way to just stop and get curious and practice mindfulness. And it really can break these patterns. It's amazing.
And that's exactly what happened to me. I learned how to notice the thoughts that would exacerbate my pain. Notice, you know, the stress level that was exacerbating my pain. Notice how I was approaching pain, how I was catastrophizing, and the impact that was having on my psyche, and slowly work on deprogramming these old ways. And we can. And that's really the magic of it, is that we're empowered. The one thing we can always choose is how we react to reality in our environment. That's a choice that we create inside. And to kind of go back to the beginning, the answer was never outside. The answer for me was very much inside. And it was recognition that you've been putting through your nervous system through a whole lot of tension and stress for a long time. That you have been allowing this mind patterns, these thought patterns of negative nature to run wild for a long time, and that you haven't asked for the support that you've needed for the longest time. So I had to just take a big pause.
Yeah.
Say, okay, where can we go from here? How can I change from here? And that required an entire change of life, you know, an entire lifestyle change. It's scary. It was very scary. Now, I don't recommend every person that's in pain go out there and quit your career of a decade. I don't recommend that to everyone, but that's what I needed to do, because the security and the fear of not having it was so great for me that the only way I could find the freedom from it was to just take a leap.
Yeah. The leap of faith. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, I love to hear other resources. So what are some of the other resources, books you would recommend, or, you know, practices that you just like your top favorite mindfulness practice that you've incorporated in your life? Like, what are some of those? So you mentioned Dr. Sarno had a big influence on you. Who else has influenced you, or works have influenced you?
I can tell you that by far the greatest teacher I've had has been Gabor Mate, Dr. Gabor Mate. And he's an incredible author, bestseller, New York Times bestselling author.
I'm not familiar, so I'm going to write this for the audience. Can you spell? So it's, yes, what's the name again?
Gabor with a G, so G-A-B-O-R.
G-A-B-O-R?
Mhm.
Okay.
So Gabor Mate, and just like a mate drink, M-A-T-E with the little accent.
Can't do the accent, but I got my mate going.
So Gabor Mate has written quite a few books, and I initially started reading his work around addiction and the link between trauma and addiction. He does an incredible book. The book is called In the Realm of the Hungry Ghosts. It's a powerful read. So if anyone has, any family members, beloveds that have battled addiction, it's an incredible book that provides a very holistic understanding of addiction from a personal standpoint, from trauma standpoint, and also from a sociological standpoint. How our lifestyles are contributing, how our economic systems are contributing to mass traumatization that manifests itself in form of addiction. But I became really curious about his work on mind-body medicine. Okay. He wrote a book called When the Body Says No.
Okay.
When the Body Says No does a deep dive across different kind of autoimmune illnesses and their link with trauma. And so he's done tremendous amount of research in that space.
Okay.
And what's really fascinating is that based on his finding, 85% of people who have intravenous drug addictions sexually abused as children.
Really?
Society.
It's a way to numb it, right?
Exactly. But we say, oh, they're the drug addicts and junkies, or label them in all these ways and separate, and judge and, incarcerate people that are victims.
Yeah.
So, there has to be a conversation around changing the culture around how we treat people. And that's why I went and got trained with trauma. Once I started understanding trauma, it was the biggest teaching for me. It changed how I interact with the world. It changed
how. Talk about a teacher. Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those big traumas, it's like a lot of people don't have the resources and they don't know where to turn. And we are a culture of numbing, whether it's something like drugs or sex or gambling or food, right? As opposed to feeling it, because feeling it can be painful. And yet the teaching is to feel it and is to process it, right?
You have to feel it. That's for sure.
You do. And the issues are in the tissues. Right? I believe both of those things so wholeheartedly. Yeah.
So, that was one of the biggest understandings. And I took big inspiration from his work of also looking at when the nervous system goes through trauma in early childhood, especially. And we've seen this, what we call with ACE categories, adverse childhood experiences categories. And there's categories of different experiences that if someone goes through, the more of them they have in their childhood, the more likely they are to develop addiction, the more likely they are to develop autoimmune illnesses, to have psychological troubles down the road. So we want to have a more holistic understanding of some of those more chronic illnesses. When it comes to acute illnesses, it's a whole other category. But when it comes to chronic illnesses, I'm finding more and more links that are suggesting a strong connection between our childhood experiences and our resiliency, both physically and emotionally in adulthood. So that's definitely, I would highly recommend, if nobody's familiar with him, definitely there's a few podcasts that feature him, and he's featured in documentaries, and his work is absolutely groundbreaking. I highly recommend it.
Yeah. I've got one more question that really stands out for me. And I know it was through taking your course that you really talked about, it's sometimes the little things that our nervous system perceives as traumatic, and how that over time, I call it stacking, right? But it's like how that can impact us sometimes, depending on the nervous system and depending on the person, as profoundly as something like child abuse, and not, and you really brought up in that class, like there's not like apples to apples comparison around how the nervous system perceives trauma and threat and survival and all of that. Can you just take a moment to speak to that? Because you've talked about Someone just said Keela or Kayla, hello. She said Dr. Gabon Mate, M-A-T-E. It's actually M-A-T-T-E, right?
No, just one T.
Yes. Okay. All right. So you got it, Keela.
Hello.
Hello. Let's do a shout out. Who else do we have here? We've got Precious Williams. I know we've got some likes for some women. Chelsea. Hello, Chelsea. And so anyway, just taking a moment, because I hadn't really thought about that before. And to me, it was like, wow. So can you just take a moment to speak to that?
Mm-hmm. I think if I understand you correctly, you're referring to the differences that we outlined with how trauma happens.
Yes.
And the event that triggers
the event.
Yes. Yeah. So
it might be catastrophic. It could be just something that seems small, but our body perceives it as much bigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when we talk about trauma, most people think of trauma as something really awful that happened to someone, right? That's kind of our perception. However, in order for someone to become traumatized, from a clinical definition, for someone to be traumatized, the nervous system will have to move into what we call the freeze state. So there's fight and flight and freeze. Okay. Fight and flight, we've all experienced fight and flight. A car all of a sudden goes too fast or runs a red light right in front of you. You hit the brakes, your heart's pounding, there's all this heat built in the body. You're like, oh my God, and you're fine. But the fight and flight got activated because your nervous system has a mode for ensuring your survival. If a tiger was chasing you, you would want to be able to fight or flight. So certain physiological functions become deprioritized so that other things become that are going to support you in fighting or flighting and sustaining life become prioritized. Your eye vision, your heart rate goes up, your lungs start taking in more oxygen, and blood gets redirected to your limbs so that you can fight or flight. So certain things become deprioritized, and certain things become heightened in the body as a result of fight or flight. Now, that's wonderful. It's a gift, but we also want to be mindful of how often do we move into fight or flight continuously. If we continue to keep our nervous system in fight or flight, they'll never go into our baseline, our resting and digesting baseline. So people who are often too stressed, all the time living in stress, living in fight and flight, they will have digestive problems because their digestive system isn't getting the blood supply to do its digestive work. They will have heart problems because the heart isn't getting a break. Their wounds will more difficultly heal because the healing of the wounds isn't being prioritized. Right. So there are various different conditions that are stemmed from us being in a fight and flight response for too long, which we know of these as stress-borne illnesses. Stress-borne illnesses, stress is the leading contributor to top 5 killer diseases in the United States. So it is absolutely essential that we find effective ways of addressing stress. And we haven't as a society just quite yet, but we're doing very good work right now to get there.
Yes.
And the third state that people often don't know about or isn't talked about is the freeze state. And so if you would think of this is your baseline, resting and digesting, everything's functioning normally. When the fight and flight becomes activated, then the energy level goes up quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And then when the episode has passed, then the energy level usually comes back, and you will drop back into resting and digesting. However, if fight and flight gets activated and the energy gets built up here, and the individual doesn't have the opportunity to fight or flight, so that opportunity isn't there, they don't get to use that energy in their body, what happens is that the nervous system will go below baseline. Okay. In what we call a freeze state. And the freeze state, again, is an empathic mechanism that the nature has created in our nervous system. When a gazelle is being chased by a lion, its fight and flight is active. The gazelle gets caught by the lion, it might struggle for a minute or two, and then the gazelle recognizes it's not going away, it's going to get eaten by the lion. That's when the gazelle's nervous system drops into what we call a freeze state, can't fight or flight, drops into a freeze state where the nervous system becomes desensitized. So the gazelle is not experiencing pain as it's being eaten by the lion. Yeah. We have the same empathic mechanism in humans. So our fight and flight gets activated, someone's attacked, held down, beaten, and then at some point they realize, no, I'm not gonna be able to fight or flight. The nervous system immediately moves into what we call a freeze state. The person doesn't move, might even look dead, and they're desensitized. So their body isn't feeling the sensations. They might not even hear it. Their brain isn't even processing most of it, which is why trauma memory is fragmented. A lot of times people don't remember all the details of what happened. So the nervous system has moved into a freeze state. Now, when the nervous system moves into freeze state, it can stay there. It can stay there and not come out, which is why, if people who work predominantly with traumatized children or even adults that have been deeply traumatized, especially in childhood, which has a very, very different impact than adulthood, that you'll find that there's this dead stare. A lot of people that they just seem to not quite be there, not be quite engaged with the environment, almost feel frozen, almost look frozen. That's because they're still in the freeze state.
Okay.
So the events that can trigger that, that's where we call trauma. Trauma only happens when someone drops into freeze state.
I didn't realize that, actually. This is really fascinating for me.
Yeah, and it's physiologically you can measure that. So following an episode, if you monitor someone's heart rate and it drops below a certain point, that's a risk for going into freeze. And so if they do not drop below the baseline, they're probably going to be fine and not be traumatized. So trauma isn't so much what happens outside.
Yeah, what happens inside. And it makes such sense too. Like, what a brilliant system to numb the experience by, having amnesia, right? And not, we look at the brilliancy of our nervous system, and it just amazes me. And this, what are you calling it? So, what's the category of freeze? The freeze state, right? How, when you think about it, is actually it's a system to once again protect us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's an empathic nature.
Yeah.
And when people say, "Oh, nature's brutal," I'm like, no, nature is empathic. Nature is absolutely empathic. It really supports us in this way.
Yeah.
Now, that it could happen that somebody gets attacked, on a corner of the street and fights someone or gets away. They're not going to be traumatized, no matter how traumatizing we might categorize it as in our language. Oh, it was such a traumatizing event. But if you got to fight or flight, if you got away, you're not traumatized.
Interesting. I have never heard
something really subtle. We live in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles traffic is notorious. And there was a period of time that I was making really long drives. And my commute was really long, about 2 hours sometimes. Sometimes it would take 2.5, 3 hours sometimes I was in the car. And something happens to you when you're in a car for that long, and you know that your drive should take probably 45 minutes to an hour, and you're still 3 hours later, you're still in a car.
Yes.
So your nervous system, there's everything in your body that's in fight and flight. It just does not want to be there. You're being frustrated. It's also how you perceive it, of course. You're frustrated. I need to get home. I need to rest. I'm hungry. This is so tiring. All of that activates fight and flight. Well, we don't get to fight the traffic. We could keep honking and have road rage, but it's not quite going to do the job of fight or flight. And we certainly can't abandon our car in the middle of the road and just take off and say, I'm not doing this anymore.
Right.
We don't get to do that. So we might not think of this as a traumatizing event, but there is a point that if this event that puts you through fight or flight continuously over and over again, and you're engaging in that event over and over again, over time, it will have a similar effect as trauma.
Oh my gosh. You LA people, you're what's going to happen? Whoa. Trauma in LA.
We just avoid try. It's,
you know what y'all could do though? You could have right in the center in your console some raisins. And you could grab that raisin and you could get it in your mouth and you could be like,
That's a great way. So that actually is perfect. I'll kind of use that as a segue into a little tip.
Okay, cool.
So the little tip being, we notice fight and flight becoming activated. We know whether we have an outlet or not. More times than not, we don't. especially people who work in corporate environments. You might might have difficult bosses, difficult colleagues. You're going to have to interface with them all the time. They really trigger you, and you're just like trying to not let it out. So there's no fight or flight, right? You got to be decent and hold your own, and be kind. Yet your internal nervous system might get really activated. So what do we do in that moment that it's happening? So one of the goals really that comes from a mind-body world is that often we think that when we're stressed, the answer to our stress comes from our mind, and we should change how we think, and we should just think of different things, and then we're going to get less stressed. Mm-hmm. That will support you not in the moment, but a systematic approach, a strategic approach to your thoughts and how you process thoughts will support you on the long term. That takes time because those thoughts have been there for decades, most likely. However, in the moment, if you want a quick response, quick way of calming the nervous system, one of the best ways to do this is to bring awareness to our body. We can calm our mind by bringing awareness to our body. Now, most prominently, people know of pranayama, breath practice, breath work practice that's designed to calm the nervous system. But there's also your sensations. So if you tune your attention to your sensations, to one of your 5 senses or all of them, my favorite one is to rub your earlobe. Now, in a meeting, that might be tough. So, you might look really awkward doing that in a meeting. But you can also just, wiggle your toes in your shoes and nobody can see that. Or just rub the back of your hands, not the palm of your hands, because they're not as sensitive, but maybe the back of your hands on the front of your thighs. So there's all these sensations that you can instigate in your body. So I like the earlobe exercise the most because as you start rubbing your earlobe, you're noticing texture, you're noticing temperature, and you're also noticing sound. So there's at least 3 of your senses become activated. Yeah. Keep your awareness there for a period of at least 20 seconds. 100% of your awareness on a sense for about 20 seconds minimum. That will immediately start calming the nervous system. Because our nervous system gets activated when our amygdala, which is the alarm system of the brain, that's in our emotional brain, gets activated. Once the amygdala is set in motion, it's actually really difficult to regulate it. So once it's set in motion, it's in this reactive state, and immediately it will help secrete cortisol, the stress hormone in your body. Now you're in a stress response. The only part of the brain that's capable of regulating the actions of the amygdala is in our medial prefrontal cortex.
You're geeking out and sharing the neurology. Yes, I love this stuff. I love it.
I am a total nerd.
I love it. You're bringing me right back to human anatomy and chiropractic school. Fantastic.
Yeah. So medial prefrontal cortex is the only part, or cingulate cortex within it is the only part. If the cingulate cortex becomes active, the amygdala becomes deactivated. And the only way we can actually manually stimulate the cingulate cortex is by tuning into our senses.
You can't put your finger in your ear and far enough. Give it a little massage.
So yeah, and as we do this, it activates this other part of the brain, immediately calms the amygdala. So anytime, if you feel stressed, activated, and really just wish that you could just calm down for a moment, bring your awareness to your senses, not to your thoughts, not to the environment, none of that, just to your senses. And immediately you'll notice that you're going to feel much better. But you need 20 seconds of focus.
20 seconds, and that's not long. I mean, when you think about what a great tip, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. And that, as you said, the neurology supports it. So how cool is that, right? I mean, what if we could teach, what if we could teach our children this?
Right? We should.
Like,
teach our children.
Right? I love it. I love it. Mm-hmm. Well, you've shared so many juicy details. I totally love it. I love this conversation. I would also love our listeners to know, how they can reach out to you and how you might be able to support them. And if you want to share, we'd love to hear.
Definitely. So Your listeners can find me on my website called thebrainmastery.com. And I offer work in somatic therapy, both in person and online. And I also work with mind-body medicine, predominantly on stress and stress-borne conditions. And when we work on stress, we're working on a big, spectrum of different symptoms. I work with stress as a core thing and address all the symptoms of it, whether it's performance, ADD, whether it's illness, or even allergies. We can really address so much in our body by addressing stress.
Beautiful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. So grateful to have you sharing your love and your knowledge, and you're such a bright soul, and to think where you came from when I didn't know you to where you are today. I mean, we are just so blessed for you to be sharing your journey and helping so many people. So thank you, Anahita.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Such a pleasure to be here with you. And thank you, everyone who's tuned in.
Wonderful. All right, ladies. We'll say goodbye.
Bye-bye.